almost without fail, I told Gabe this yesterday, the data shows us that any time a player has something shift in his life, it's almost always a break-even or a losing month for the next month in cash, which shouldn't happen very often. Is that you have a big winner who's either like got a death in the family or is moving or something, and all of a sudden it just volume drops off or there's tilt all month. It's constantly fascinates me how much a shift in the life style of a player is like massively impacting his performance, to the point where if I had it my way, I would love to just have all my players on an island somewhere, not able to leave, like locked in, and have everything that they need. And I saw Yuri took a bracelet down. It's pretty sweet. What was that in?
It was 2500. I think it was high-low, 8 or better, or something like that. Like, he plays every game, so like I'm not sure. It was that, I think. I met
That's
him
awesome.
yesterday. Yeah, amazing.
Trying to think of things that.
I mean, like the thing for me, if I contacted you because like I watch a lot of your videos and I like how you think, and I remember, I don't know if it was a podcast or maybe you shared your site somewhere. I saw something similar that you were experiencing, something that I feel like I'm experiencing right now, which is around. I noticed that, like, I don't know, the last 2 years I took a lot of information in, but I noticed there's a huge gap between me playing and teaching, between like me teaching or like, you know, reviewing hands and me just actually when I'm playing. I noticed that this last week I just got really honest with myself, and I noticed like, hey, like you're not playing as good as you think you are, and like I noticed that my emotions started to take over way more than before, you know, and like little things would affect me, and I think it's also because, you know, I've been sort of ups and downs for the last year or last 2 years, and
In your own personal results, you mean?
yeah.
Okay.
I'm talking about me right now.
Okay.
So it's like my brain is not functioning the way it was once I was doing better.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, when I'm calm and I'm just like reviewing hands, I can think clearly, but when I'm playing, that's not happening. And I notice, you know, like I want to control things that are not in my control, and I've been noticing all of these reactions that I've been having.
Nice.
That I mean, I just noticed, you know, like my emotional game, like my emotions are not in the right place. And I started doing some journaling, some things to see, you know, what triggers me, and sort of start organizing all of that. But yeah, even when I want to study, like, you know, like there are so many places to go, which things to study and all of that. And I noticed like, you know, it's hard for me to sort of focus on one thing and master it. And I just kind of pick a lot of information from different like topics, and then like, you know, I think I don't apply it for long enough to master it, and then I think this is where I get confused.
Okay.
And, you know, I had a lot of also situations of my life, just like as we were talking, you know, I had a kid like last year, and other situations outside of, you know, my career, that I think they had a weight. But right now, like, I learned to detach like my personal life with poker. Like, I don't think it affects me so much. I can be with my kid, I can be with my family, and be happy and be fine. Like, my session is over, I'm fine.
Finances are okay, like on the whole.
Yeah, like it's fine.
Okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Like, I'm still good, you know, but I've lost a lot, and so I was much better.
Let's talk about that. Mm-hmm. I want to see if that's actually true. Are you comfortable with where you're at your best? If we were to sit here and look at hands and you were to explain it to me as if I was one of your students. Are you happy with where your methodology is when you're at your best? In other words, is the tilt coming from you not playing up to your potential, or is the frustration that you don't know the next place to learn the new thing? Or maybe both? Mostly the first.
Yeah, mostly the first one, because
Okay.
like, sometimes I just, like, I was on the plane, I watched this video, I don't know, from Pats or whatever. I'm like, yeah, like, this is what I think, this, it was like pretty much the same line of thought. And then, like, when I'm playing, it's like, it seems like even like, counting the pot becomes tough, like small things become tough. And then I get confused, and I'm like, where should I bluff his hand or no, and like, I don't know, it's weird.
It's weird because it's confusing what causes performance stress when you're caught in an analytical frenzy. Like, the most fascinating thing to me, because I know what you're talking about, I know what it's like to know that you know more than you're able to access when you're playing, exactly. Or know that you know more than you're able to organize when you're playing. And I know I don't like to talk about this in an abstract way, but I really do think it comes down to, do I trust that if I calmly sort through the data points of the hand, that I can make a decision that over the course of 1 million hands will perform very well? Everything that I'm trying to do right now with cash game players or tournament players is get people to look through the lens of the million hand perspective, because I think that's what actually kills the urgency. Like, just from listening to you, I think most of your issues are that you haven't won in a while and you're scrambling to try to get results back on a subconscious level, which causes you to rationalize against solid methodology. It's not an original problem.
And like, I think there's like accumulated emotion, like, if I run a bluff that doesn't work, I think about, the other bluffs, and like, it kind of adds up.
Well, yeah, you have a year of negative confirmation bias putting pressure on you.
Yeah.
It's pretty strange how once you're on a heater again, you think way more clearly. Because what's actually happening is all of the run bad from the spots that you took that you were supposed to take that didn't work is now getting counteracted by a good run where things are working very well. And your mind is starting to relax again and be like, okay, I remember what it's like to win. I remember that my methodology performs very well. The problem arises when you go on a downswing for long enough with a good methodology that the mind starts to struggle for control and wants to change variables that shouldn't be changed. Ultimately, I think your problem is a misperception in the variance of the game, which I can't even relate to you in tournaments how bad that must be, because I play cash and it's still bad. But I think if I had to just go all in, I would say that the most powerful tournament mindset players are the one that have the best perception of variance. And not just like the ability to do a variance calculation and say, this is how it's supposed to be, but the ability to take that into a real game scenario and say, I will not deviate from what I know to be true just because I haven't had results in a year. And a year is a long time. Like I said, I can't relate to what it must be like to not have a winning year playing. But I think above all, you're going to benefit from focusing on how safe you actually are in this career if you get yourself aligned with the 1 million hand perspective. And then play every hand as though it's the millionth hand. Like, literally, picture a 1 million hand sample, and then every hand within that is not separate from the million. That's kind of the window that I'm trying to get the industry to look at things from. Because if you can do that, like if you can blend your perception to see that, like, you right now and you in 2020 is not a million hands away. It's this hand, and it's this hand, and it's every hand. And each of those hands actually makes up the million hand perspective. It kills urgency. And that's ultimately what you're trying to do, because it's the urgency that's making you think that you're not doing enough or not winning enough hands or that you need to make this bluff or not make this bluff because the last one failed.
Or that I need to make it happen now, right? Like in this series, I have to win, like something like that. And then it's, like,
So let's go into that, like, because I want to find out what the source of the urgency is. Otherwise, I don't think you're going to actually be able to crush it. Something's not making sense on a deeply subconscious level to you if you still have urgency, but you understand that the current finances are okay. You're not desperate.
I mean, they're okay in terms of my life, but in terms of like my bankroll for playing, it's going down, and then I need to sell action, stuff like that.
So how much of this is about you projecting into the future how much time you have left before the downswing takes you under? Is that on your mind?
Like it's like I guess I'm afraid to think that I need to go way down in like stakes and maybe get a stake.
Okay,
instead of
cool.
playing on my own, and like it's kind of a setback that I don't wanna be in.
Okay, so
And then it's bad because like I made like during these last 2 years or 1 year, I made a lot of wrong decisions in terms of what you say variance. Like I play higher than I should and stuff like that.
so mistakes have been made.
Of course.
And there might be some guilt around that, or you put yourself in a worse position than you should have.
I mean, I feel like to be honest right now, I feel like it was part of the journey. Like I feel like I had to do those mistakes because like in the beginning of my career, I was always placing stakes, so always someone told me what I had to do with the tournaments, and then I needed to learn for myself.
For sure.
How to do it.
So taking it to the worst case scenario now, do you really believe that you need to go broke to learn more?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's the first really deep question, I think. Like, and when I say that, I mean, do you really think there would be a lot more to learn from you losing another 100,000?
No.
Okay. So can you see that fearing that reality is going to disrupt your performance in every hand? You need to see this thing if you're going to not allow yourself to tilt, because you thinking, when you sit down today, if the subconscious part of your mind is fearing that you could potentially lose 100 more K and be in a really weird spot, a scary spot, that's going to affect whether or not you bluff a good spot or call out of urgency or out of discipline. So really, I think the entire process comes down to you beginning to have more faith that doesn't need to happen to you. And this is where things get really interesting, because when I say something like that to a lot of players, they'll be like, well, what are you trying to say, Nick, that I'm just supposed to trust in law of attraction? They think I'm going in the woo-woo direction, but I'm not actually doing that. I'm saying the quality of your decision in every moment will be affected by whether or not you trust that you've learned what you need to learn already, and that the bad event doesn't need to happen to you before you have the results that you're worthy of. This is one of the major skeptic distortions that I see throughout the industry. I said yesterday with the kids sitting here, if I sit a player down and I do a poker dope variance simulation and I plot 100 lines on a graph and I say, which one are you? You know how this works, right? You can plug in your win rate for cash games at least, and it'll plot out 100 or 1,000 simulation lines to simulate all these different types of samples that could occur. I'll ask the guy, if I point to you and I say, which one are you? And he doesn't point to one that's average or above, I know that guy's coming from a skeptical inclination and likely doesn't trust himself and probably has deep-rooted emotions that feel like he needs more punishment before he can learn what he needs to learn or get the success that he needs to get. So for a guy like you, I don't sense a lot of guilt in your system. I think you're relatively forgiven as a person, which is the first step to actually clearing the sludge out of that paradigm. I think what you're dealing with is just a lack of clarity over that neurosis still being, it's almost like you need to scrape it up from the subconscious and bring more awareness to it. So you can be like, oh, I see that. And I see that it's trying to help me. It's trying to help me to play better so I don't lose another 100,000. But it doesn't actually help. Because what it does is it makes me urgent and reactive, and that actually affects my decision making. That's the link you have to make in your head. The moment you see that fearing the downswing doesn't actually benefit you as a player is the moment you're going to access your real potential. but it's counterintuitive because people think if I'm going to stop myself from losing 100,000, I've got to protect myself from that reality. I've got to try super hard in this hand. I got to manage this hand. But the management causes a performance stress that brings your cognitive functioning down.
Exactly.
If you see that clearly, you'll stop doing it. It feels scary because it feels like you're almost being naive at that point. It almost feels like if I stop white knuckling this hand and trying to play it perfectly, then somehow I'm going to miss something. But really what's happening is by holding on for dear life in the hand, which you might not be doing, like, I'm not saying you're like gripping your seat, but like there's a portion of your mind that's not functioning it's concerned.
It's worried, yeah, definitely.
That's what's distorting your decision making. And then the problem with that is when we filter it through the million hand sample, you are now a player who's playing below potential in each hand on a million hand sample. So you actually don't deserve to win at that point because your decisions are shit.
Yeah, and that's how I feel.
So, I mean, people talk about this as like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, but you have to see it structurally. Like, I'm not speaking abstractly to you right now. I know it. There's people who don't explain this in a concrete way, and it ends up being like a spiritual discussion. I'm not doing that. I believe that you could explain it that way, but I'm trying to give you the structural breakdown of how your cognitive functioning is being affected by being concerned about the future. If you tell me that you really trust your ability as a player, your full potential, what you know away from the table, and then you tell me you can't access that because you're worried, I'm telling you that you need to release the stress in order to get your game back. But it's scary, I get that. But I swear to you, man, like the moment you drill something again, like when's the last time you had a big score?
I think it was February maybe.
Okay, so months ago, 3-4 months ago.
Yeah, it was like 50K and I kind of lost it all.
The moment that you have a big score again, from playing in a relaxed way, something's gonna happen to your mind where you're like, okay, I know that place that I have to play from now. The thing about
that happened, like it was so funny because like I never do this like really, but this time it happened because it was Inception, so I was like with a hangover, and then I was like, you know what, I know I can perform really well today, so I'm just gonna play less tables, be relaxed about it. So what I did is I started to play less tables that exact day, and then just really flow and just be, at ease with that, because like I knew I had to take that decision in order to play, and then that's the day I won. The day I didn't care.
The day that you took it slower and stopped being so urgent about performing. Funny how that works. And clearly you ran well too, but like
of course.
You probably played well that day too.
Yeah.
It's funny how we constantly try to make our schedules busier in terms of playing more volume. Like, I could speak about this in two ways. Do you need to play a lot of volume? Yes. But if playing a lot of volume is coming from a place of urgency, I'd rather see you play less.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing, if you're playing a ton of volume from a place that's frantic and restless, you're training yourself into a performance frequency that's super below your potential. And then before you know it, like literally what you're doing is you're training yourself into neural pathways that are below your actual potential. And what that actually means is you are training yourself to perceive reality in a distorted way.
Yeah, and to create this experience of like, poker is, or like playing is like this, is like stressful or with tension, instead of creating an experience that is more
relaxed and enjoyable and abundant. Like that's a huge thing that nobody talks about. Like, the day that poker becomes a stressful experience for you is the day that you need to take a break and do deep level mindset work.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's a lot of aspects of that. Like, it could just be that you find out that you're playing too outside of your bankroll and you need to actually just play lower limits. It could be that you just have a lot of self-beliefs that everybody knows when you're bluffing and you just can't get your mind around making a bluff anymore because the last 10 bluffs, 100 bluffs have failed. It's a type of game where the mind is super susceptible to confirmation bias because the pot odds environment is set up in a way where you're not supposed to win. Each time, you're actually supposed to lose. And if you have a silly expectation for the investment model, which is poker, the pot odds model, the confirmation bias compounds itself and you build up what's called an emotional deficit. Like, this is scientific. If you have someone who has a win and a loss, they don't feel that equally in their system. Winning a hand and losing a hand, the loss feels worse. So you're building up an emotional deficit that you're a losing person even when you're making plus EV decisions. If you can't combat that with strong mindset work that trains yourself to see that I can call a half pot bet and be good a third of the time and be very, very well off there, or breaking even there at least. I can bluff this spot for half pot and it can win 33% of the time. I'm losing most of the time when I make this bluff, but I'm actually performing well. It's stuff like this that I feel is probably the biggest value that I can offer to players who are already good. Like, there's a difference. That I don't feel like I need to speak to you from the level of, like, not that I could because I don't play tournaments, but if you were a cash player, like, I wouldn't think I would be the guy that's like running through your hands and reworking your methodology, basically. I think I'd be the guy talking to you like, you're already good. What are you doing to yourself? Like, why are you doing this to yourself?
Yeah, it's funny how, like, I found ways to kind of convince myself that I need to repeat that. For example, I got here yesterday, so last week, online, everyone says so soft because everyone's here. So that's why I was like, okay, I gotta play every day and like every possible tournament in order to be good. And then I noticed like this is where I fuck up because like I can't perform well either if I just like try to grab all the EV everywhere.
Well, I really want you to bring to the surface where that paradigm is rooted. Like, let me ask this.
It comes from like
if you didn't,
Scarcity.
okay, cool. But so what happens ultimately if you don't grab all the EV as fast as possible? In your mind, what are you running from? Like, if I told you you're not allowed to play for a week and you're only allowed to play the best tournament every week on Sunday. You can only play 10 tournaments for the rest of the summer. Does that create a sense of scarcity in your mind? Like, does it feel like I'm just not doing enough, that's not fast enough?
Like the first thing that comes to my mind is like I'm never gonna make it.
Never gonna make it. I'm never gonna get back what I lost.
Or where I was, or like like never gonna make it, yeah. And
why?
I don't know if also like there is a way between like I surround myself with very good players. Even my partners are very good players, and I think to be in this position where I feel like we have similar skill levels and like I'm not doing well and they're doing pretty good. Also, I think it's probably a factor. It's like when do I get to be where they are? Which adds up to.
And what's the belief in your head there? Like, is this true? Do you believe you need to play a lot of volume to be worthy of another tournament score?
No.
Do you believe you could actually win the tournament you're going to play today?
Yeah.
Like, actually? Like, when you sit down, can you... But I mean, you could speak about this in a few different ways because it's unlikely.
It's very unlikely, yeah.
It's very unlikely, but does that unlikeliness make you feel like it's impossible?
Not right now. Not
okay.
where I am. Not where I am right now.
Okay.
Because I just got here. I'm fresh.
Yeah, there's new hope.
Yeah.
If you have a distorted belief around how much volume you need to play to become worthy of winning again, that's no longer healthy. That's no longer a healthy perspective on volume. Like, it's paradoxical because if you told me, Nick, I'm only going to play 10 tournaments this year, I'd say, you're out of your fucking mind. You're not a professional. You shouldn't expect to win. But if you told me, I'm going to play 1,000 tournaments this year because I really need to get that EV back, I'm going to tell you, you're probably coming from a place of scarcity. Do you see the paradox?
Yeah.
So it's about finding this balance where you can pump volume, but you do it from a place of presence in every tournament, where every tournament could be the hit. And you don't need to play 1,000 to be worthy of hitting that one. You play 1,000 because you like to play and you understand the model on a macro level, that's what's going to be required over the long term. The moment that you start to believe that you need to play 1,000 tournaments to win one is the moment where you position yourself on one of those bottom sample lines of that poker dope simulation, and now you have a mindset issue because you think you're unworthy relative to the guy who's to your left and to your right. When in reality, you're actually much more worthy of winning that tournament than most of the guys at your table because you're fundamentally better. This is what a downswing does, though, bro. It fucks with you. On a deep level, it distorts how well you think you're able to perform in any given tournament.